The Drellans were a species of delicate beauty and profound wisdom. Their bodies resembled intertwining vines of translucent green, shimmering faintly under the pale sunlight of their home planet, Vetrax 5. Every movement they made was slow and deliberate, like a tree swaying in the wind. Their civilization was one of art, music, and philosophy, a tapestry of thought woven over millennia. They had no need for war or conquest, and as a result, their technological advancements remained minimal. For the Drellans, life was about harmony, not domination. But harmony had its price. When Vetrax 5's star erupted in an unforeseen solar flare, the devastation was swift and merciless. The once lush forests burned, the rivers boiled away, and the planet's delicate biosphere collapsed into a smoldering wasteland. Without the unique nutrients of their home soil, the Drellans began to wither, their roots shriveling and their translucent vines turning brittle. The Drellans reached out to the galaxy for aid, broadcasting desperate pleas to the countless advanced civilizations they had once called neighbors. They sought ships to evacuate their people and technology to recreate their unique ecosystem elsewhere. Yet, despite the grandeur of the Galactic Union, a coalition of over 50 species, help never came. In the Union's Grand Council chambers, their plight was debated, dissected, and dismissed. The Drellans, though admired for their cultural contributions, were deemed economically insignificant. They held no strategic planets, no vast mineral wealth, and no military alliances. The cold arithmetic of galactic politics had no room for empathy. "They are a dying species," one prominent delegate had declared. "Let nature take its course." Some species offered token condolences, while others outright mocked their fragility. For all the galaxy's technological and cultural achievements, compassion seemed a luxury no one could afford. Over time, the Drellans' pleas turned into faint whispers, drowned out by the clamor of galactic affairs. Humanity, meanwhile, had only recently secured its place on the interstellar stage. Earth was still recovering from centuries of its own crises, climate collapse, wars, and pandemics. Yet it was precisely these struggles that shaped humanity's identity. They knew what it meant to stand on the brink of extinction and to claw their way back from it. When fragments of the Drellans' distress signals reached human space, they were met with disbelief and anger. The idea that an entire species could be abandoned to die while others watched was unthinkable to most humans. Earth's leaders convened in an emergency session, their debates filled with urgency and passion. "We cannot afford this," one advisor argued. "We're still rebuilding. If we don't act, who will?" countered another. The decision was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Humanity would intervene, not for profit, not for alliances, but because it was the right thing to do. As Earth's resources were mobilized, the galaxy looked on with indifference. After all, what could one fledgling species hope to achieve where entire civilizations had turned away? What they didn't realize was that humanity had a history of doing the impossible. The decision to act was only the beginning. Humanity faced a monumental challenge, saving a species whose survival depended on an ecosystem they could barely comprehend. The Drellans' physiology required specific nutrients, temperatures, and soil compositions, conditions that no human technology had been designed to replicate. But humanity had never let impossibility stop them before. Earth's leaders quickly issued a call to action. Scientists, engineers, and volunteers from every corner of the planet rallied to the cause. Teams of biologists studied the Drellan physiology, poring over fragments of data gleaned from intercepted distress signals. Chemists worked to synthesize the nutrients their roots required, while engineers designed portable habitats to stabilize the Drellans during transit. Time was not on their side, and the sheer scope of the effort was staggering. Resources were stretched thin. Transporting the Drellans would require ships equipped with life support systems far beyond standard designs. Earth's fledgling space fleet had no such vessels, so modifications began immediately. Factories ran day and night, workers sacrificing sleep and comfort to meet impossible deadlines. Every delay, every setback, was another death among the Drellans. The scale of human cooperation was unprecedented. Nations that had once bickered over borders and resources now shared blueprints and expertise without hesitation. Private corporations contributed materials, while civilians organized donation drives. Schoolchildren collected funds to support the mission, and artists created works to inspire hope. The entire planet seemed united by a single purpose, proving that no life was too small to matter. But not everyone supported the effort. Critics in the galactic community labeled humanity's actions as naive and wasteful. "They're throwing their limited resources into a black hole," one alien commentator scoffed. Even within Earth's leadership, dissenting voices warned of the risks. What if the Drellans could not be saved? What if humanity's interventions sparked resentment from other species? Despite the doubts, the work continued. The scientists faced one of their biggest hurdles when they discovered that Drellan roots required not only nutrients, but also a living microbial network unique to their homeworld soil. Without this symbiotic relationship, the Drellans would perish even in the most advanced habitats. This revelation nearly derailed the mission, but the team refused to give up. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A young researcher, inspired by Earth's history of agricultural resilience, proposed using genetically modified Earth microbes to mimic the missing network. It was a gamble, but with no alternatives, the plan was implemented. Success came after weeks of relentless experimentation, a moment met with cheers and tears across every laboratory involved. As the first fleet of ships launched toward Vetrax 5, Earth watched with bated breath. The vessels carried the hopes of billions, along with the tools and technology to defy a galaxy's indifference. Each crew member knew the risks. The journey was fraught with hazards, unpredictable solar activity, debris fields, and the constant pressure of limited time. But they also knew this mission was more than a rescue. It was a declaration of what humanity stood for. The arrival at Vetrax 5 was like entering a graveyard. The once vibrant planet was now a barren wasteland, its surface scorched and broken. The air shimmered with residual heat, and the skies were a muted gray, choked by ash and debris. Among the devastation, the remnants of the Drellan population clung to life. Fragile and barely mobile, they clustered in small groups, their vines brittle and lifeless in places. Many had already succumbed, their forms reduced to desiccated husks. The humans wasted no time. They deployed portable habitats, specially designed pods that mimicked the Drellan environment as closely as possible. Each pod was a lifeline, equipped with nutrient-rich soil, moisture regulators, and the microbial solutions developed on Earth. The first Drellans to be transferred reacted almost immediately, their fading colors regaining a faint glow. For the first time in weeks, they showed signs of hope. But the process was grueling. The Drellans' delicate bodies required extreme care during transport. The humans had to carry them manually, as even the lightest robotic assistants risked damaging their vines. The atmosphere was tense. Every movement felt like a race against time. The crews worked in shifts, refusing rest despite the planet's dangerous conditions. Then came the complications. Vetrax 5 was unstable, its environment deteriorating faster than predicted. Sudden tremors shook the ground, and dust storms raged unpredictably, forcing teams to retreat to their ships multiple times. The Drellans, too weak to endure such disruptions, became increasingly vulnerable. The humans had to adapt on the fly, improvising ways to shield both themselves and the Drellans from the worsening conditions. One of the gravest moments came when a storm caught a rescue team mid-transfer. The winds tore through their equipment, scattering vital supplies and threatening to overturn one of the habitat pods. In the chaos, a human crew member made the ultimate sacrifice, using their own body to shield a group of Drellans from the flying debris. The loss was devastating, but their actions saved dozens of lives. Despite the hardships, the bond between the two species began to grow. The Drellans, initially hesitant and unsure of humanity's intentions, began to trust their rescuers. A particularly moving moment came when a Drellan elder, using the faint energy they had left, communicated their gratitude. Their words were slow and halting, but their message was clear. Humanity's actions were not just saving lives, but preserving a culture, a history, a future. The turning point came when the humans devised a way to expedite the process. Using makeshift sleds built from salvaged materials, they transported larger numbers of Drellans at once, cutting down evacuation times drastically. It was a risky maneuver, but it worked. With each successful transfer, the morale of both the humans and the Drellans grew. By the end of the operation, the ships were filled to capacity. Every Drellan that could be saved had been evacuated. The humans, exhausted and battered, looked back at the dying planet as they prepared to leave. They knew they couldn't save them all, but what they had accomplished was nothing short of a miracle. The fleet returned to human space, carrying the surviving Drellans, who were still fragile but alive. The journey had been harrowing, and the work was far from over. The next challenge was finding a temporary sanctuary for a species so dependent on a specific environment. The humans had already identified a possible solution, a moon orbiting one of their colonies, Terra Nova. Its conditions were not perfect, but they were close enough to support the Drellans with some modifications. Terraforming efforts began immediately. Portable nutrient synthesizers and microbial replicators were deployed, creating patches of soil that could sustain the Drellans. Scientists and volunteers worked tirelessly, planting seeds and preparing the land while the Drellans were kept in their habitats, slowly regaining their strength. Despite the immense effort required, there was a growing sense of accomplishment. The Drellans were not just surviving, they were adapting. The Drellans, in turn, began to share pieces of their culture with their human rescuers. Their communication was limited, relying on gestures and rudimentary translation devices, but their gratitude was unmistakable. They shared songs that echoed like whispers in the wind and intricate carvings made from their fragile vines. These acts of expression moved the humans deeply, reminding them of why they had embarked on this mission. Meanwhile, the galactic response to humanity's actions was polarizing. Many species remained indifferent, dismissing humanity as reckless idealists who had squandered resources on a futile cause. Others were openly hostile, criticizing Earth for interfering with what they saw as the natural order. But not all reactions were negative. A few species, inspired by humanity's unprecedented act of compassion, began to question their own rigid, utilitarian views. Quiet discussions began in council chambers across the galaxy, planting the seeds of a potential shift in interstellar ethics. For the humans, the criticisms were irrelevant. They hadn't acted for approval or alliances, they had acted because it was right. This conviction resonated on Earth and its colonies, strengthening their collective identity. Ordinary people who had once seen themselves as insignificant now felt a sense of pride, knowing their efforts had contributed to something greater. The Drellans' recovery was slow but steady. Under human care, their once brittle vines began to grow, and their vibrant colors returned. Their leaders, though weakened, expressed a desire to rebuild. They asked for human help not as saviors but as partners. Together, the two species began collaborating on long-term solutions, such as crafting a stable ecosystem on the new moon and developing interspecies technology to ensure their survival. In time, the bond between humanity and the Drellans became a symbol of hope. Human children visited the sanctuary, learning about the Drellans' history and culture, while Drellan elders shared their wisdom and stories. The once fragile species began to flourish, supported by the very beings who had once been strangers. Humanity had achieved more than a rescue. They had proven that compassion could transcend species, and that even the smallest, most fragile lives were worth fighting for. In saving the Drellans, they had sent a message to the galaxy. Survival is not just about strength, but about the willingness to care for others. This moment would mark the beginning of a new chapter, not just for humanity, but for the galaxy itself.